it's really a important time for purple martins, and I'll talk about that in a little bit here, why the pre-migratory roosting is so important. But really, tons of purple martins all in one space. You guys are probably familiar with that. As I mentioned, the parents and the kids migrate individually. It's really tough for a fledgling bird who just learned how to fly 2 weeks ago to figure it out, right? They're kind of on their own. They got to figure out how to eat enough food to get fat and have enough energy stores on board for migration. It's really difficult life for a bird who just fledged, purple martin. There's an initial rush where they hustle down from their breeding range to Central America, where they have like a 1 to 2 month stopover in Yucatan, Honduras, Nicaragua. So this map here is really kind of a composite of several different birds that we've tracked using tracking tags from our headquarters here in Erie, but this kind of echoes other birds along the east where they do a little jump across the Gulf, except for the ones that are over here. They'll stick to the land route down and through Mexico on the west side. The far east coast ones in Florida, they may do a little island hopping. But everybody ends up taking a 1 to 2 month break in the Yucatan, or just south of the Yucatan, the hump of Honduras and Nicaragua. And then after that long, semi-long stopover there, then they kind of move at a moderate pace to the Amazon rainforest where they will overwinter. While they're in the Amazon, they're feeding over rainforests. These are actually jungle birds that happen to come up and breed in your backyard, and then they head back down to the jungle. They spend more time down there than they do in your backyard. So these are tropical birds that are just coming up here to do their breeding and take advantage of our long days in the summer. And the insects, they're more concentrated with our shorter breeding season for insects. And so they're much less kind of tied to one place down there. Their foraging range is up to 3,400 square miles, according to some research that we've done, and compare that to the breeding season where their foraging range is just 5 square miles. So these guys are going out all over the jungle, eating bugs wherever they might be flying, and then coming back typically for roosting in the same location at night. That the size of those roosts varies during the season. So they're not always like really all the birds in one area at a roost. Sometimes there's little roosts here and there, but they tend to like to show up at sunset together and take advantage of the safety in numbers. Here's an image from a paper that we did looking at purple martins from across the eastern range and where they migrate to down in South America. And for the first time, we saw something really cool. You can see the little lines coming down from those dots. So 6 different locations in the eastern range where we put GPS tags on purple martins. And you can see in the upper left picture here, 5 of those 6 locations had a bird show up at this little bitty island, a little sandbar in one of the tributaries of the Amazon. And we started to see that type of life behavior happening over and over again as you were looking at what the purple martins are doing down in Brazil. So they're feeding out over the rainforest, and then they are coming in a lot of times to these little bitty islands. You guys see pictures like this in Nashville. It just so happens that this one is in the Amazon. And this is an example of one of those islands. So when the water levels are high during the rainy season, their water levels in the Amazon and its tributaries can vary by as many as 40 feet. So during the rainy season, this looks like just little bushes, but it's the tops of big tropical trees. And the purple martins will come and land in those when they're using these island habitats. Then we got spring migration. Spring migration is a race. They are hustling back as fast as they can. Minimal stops. The Amazon to Nashville, like 4,000 miles traveled in as little as 2 weeks. So they are hustling. And they've evolved to do that because historically they were nesting in woodpecker holes. So they were rushing back to get the best nest locations. They don't now understand or haven't evolved with with the fact that basically all these gourds are roughly the same, and people are taking care of purple martins kind of the same way across the range. They're still hardwired to hustle back, and climate change has increased the risk of that strategy because early spring weather is less predictable than it once was. So frequently you'll have purple martins come back and then just get absolutely wiped out, those early arrivals, by late winter storms. When you eat only flying insects and it's cold and rainy for several days, you starve to death, especially if you've just migrated back and spent all of the fat reserves that you have. You really have no insurance left on board to survive. Here's an example of purple martin's kind of rate of migration. This one's from up in Alberta. The southern migration, it was kind of a hustle down to the Yucatan, where it spent about a month to 2 months. Then it went down to the Amazon, spent our winter down there, and then it came time to migrate back. In just 1 week, it was already back and ready to jump across the Gulf of Mexico. And then in 2 weeks, it was all the way back up in Alberta. So a bird coming back to Nashville doesn't have to, go quite that far past the Gulf states. So you could have them returning in as little as 2 weeks. Just some quick stats there on it, but I'm running low on time. Here's just an animation of some GPS tagged birds. Hopefully this is showing up well for you guys. You can see the kind of leisurely pace that they took down south. Down there, they're in the Amazon, and the areas immediately below the Amazon there where it's more agricultural due to deforestation. And then you can see how quickly they move back. Really, they just hustle back. So, really what I wanted to come back around to is, why are pre-migratory roosts so important? This is a bird that spends so much time doing other things. Why is it so important, this little window of time that they're doing this behavior in Nashville and other places across North America? Well, the first year mortality for a purple martin is 73%. So of all those birds that have fledged, only 27% are going to be alive when it comes time to breed the next year. And at a pre-migratory roost, up to 65% of all those birds at the roost are birds that are just fledged. So we've got a heavy, heavy percentage of birds there that are really up against it. They're going to have a tough time with life, and they need every single bit of help that they can get because they're on the razor's edge of survival that first year. Migration is an incredible physical feat. And the purple martins at the roost are at a crucial preparation stage for migration. They're going out, they're eating bugs all day, trying to fatten up so they've got enough energy to make it across the Gulf. They are coming back and having safety in numbers, so they're not having to be so vigilant and worry about predators quite as much. And any sort of disturbance to that, whether it be scaring them up out of where they're roosting, or removal of trees that there may be roosting in, or just the simple fact of forcing them to roost somewhere maybe that they haven't initially chosen. They've chosen a roosting location because it offers safety and security for them. And when they're pushed into other locations, they are perhaps more at risk to predators, or at the very least having to spend more energy being aware of their surroundings, perhaps flushing up and flying every time they have to take off. If it's something that maybe they don't absolutely have to do, they're burning energy that they could otherwise be saving for migration. So disturbance at a roost reduces the body condition, and when you are at the razor's edge of survival, sometimes that's the difference between life and death. And with purple martins, any kind of improvement you can do to the survival of those first year birds, which are the majority of the birds that are alive at any one time, is really important. So that is it for me. I'm a little over time, so I will cut out right now. And thank you guys so much. I look forward to hearing the rest of our presenters.
Joe, thank you. That was fascinating. And I think, for us here in Nashville, that last bit especially is the message that we need to share with people, right? Like this is like their summer camp. They're like, before we send
Yeah,
them off to college, like how do we make sure that they have a safe place? So I think
yeah,
I think there's some messaging there for us to think about, but I think I think that's just a really critical thing. So thank you for sharing that.
absolutely. It's the pit stop that they need, and every bug that they can eat and then not burn the energy from. That's something that they've got to survive on when it gets tough
Yeah.
for them, and it will.
Well, thank you. That was fascinating. Thank you so much. Um, Now we're going to move on to Will and Maria. And while you guys are getting your presentations put up, I'm going to do a quick intro to each of you. So Will received his bachelor's degree in ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of Connecticut, where he researched the effects of wind on migratory tree swallow roost using weather radar. After graduating from college, he traveled the country while conducting field work for 4 years, primarily working as a field tech for the Institute of Bird Populations, who's one of our partners, where we, for our summer maps banding project. We love those guys. He's now pursuing his master's degree at the University of Oklahoma, where he's returning to his radar roots and studying both tree swallow migratory networks and purple martin roost. And we're also thrilled to have Maria with us. Maria received her master's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Sao Paulo. She got her PhD at Colorado State University, where she established the methodology used to find and extract the size estimates of roost and weather radar data. So exciting. She's now doing her postdoc at Oklahoma State University, working with water bird migration through the Great Plains, but swallows and martins are always on her mind. So please help me welcome Will and Maria. We can't hear you, Will. I think you're still muted. Rachel, is there a way to unmute him?
Should be there
you
now.
Go. Okay, you're good now.
Cool. Yeah, super excited to be here and share this really interesting work that we've done. We've got some pretty interesting findings on sort of trends of not just the Nashville roost, but all the roosts surrounding Nashville and this whole region extending up into Tennessee. So yeah, let's just jump right in. Before we get to the radar stuff, though, I just kind of want to emphasize how these roosts are stopover sites and part of a larger sort of theme in, avian migration as a whole is just the importance of stopover sites. So whichever migratory bird you're looking at, these sites act as sanctuaries in their like most vulnerable stage of the annual cycle. And the quality and just availability of these sites dictate these birds' survival during migration, and they can really influence the size of entire populations. And that's especially important for purple martin roosts because you have entire populations gathering at single sites, and it's just super influential how these sites are protected. So just a little bit of background on roosts. Their general ecology is they're typically located kind of near water sources and in elevated open areas with like minimal underbrush. So that sort of explains why they tend to congregate in cities, since they can kind of see everything around them. And the migration tends to begin like mid to late summer after breeding, as most of us know. And they're basically roosting basically if they're not breeding, they're roosting. And they can form these traditional locations along their migratory corridors and in their non-breeding ranges for decades or up to even 100 years, as far as we know. I know Maria found a documented case of a roost. It's about 100, maybe even a little more than 100 years old in the Great Lakes region. And yeah, these sites just serve a huge purpose for their migrations that allows them to refuel on these long migratory flights, build up their fat stores before they head south. And it also provides them protection from predators in respect to this sort of safety in numbers concept. So the more surrounded you are with other potential prey, the less likely you are to be the one that gets eaten. So, and another reason they form, that we think at least, is sort of my favorite theory, which is this sort of information exchange system. So they all gather together in the evening, and in the morning they launch up and head to their foraging sites for the day. And the ones that are most confident in where they're going and where these ideal foraging sites are, the ones that are less sure, all these young first-year birds, will follow suit. And these roosts are also super useful for this sort of idea of migration synchronicity. So the timing is far more synchronized through all these birds when they're all together and leaving at the same time, essentially. And, you know, just to emphasize, these roosts have really significant conservation importance. I mean, they're key indicators of regional population health. We can use these roosts as metrics of their population trends. They allow researchers to track migration on the super fine scale, and their frequent dependence on human structures or urban areas really makes them vulnerable to these sort of disturbances that we'll be looking into. So yeah, I mean, they're also just spectacular to look at. I mean, they're so big that they show up on weather radar. I mean, they emerge every morning and they shoot straight up first, and then they extend out. And so on weather radar, it looks something like this. I'm sure many of us are familiar with this sort of imagery, but this is a morning on August 12th in 2016 of the main Nashville roost emerging. Let me get my laser going. And then we have a bit of a satellite roost down here, sort of a smaller one, coming up around Manchester area. And yeah, I mean, it's just, it happens every morning in the migration season. And we're really fortunate that it gets picked up on weather radar, because there's lots that we can do with this data. But just to provide a little bit of background of what's happening with weather radar, they're essentially these stations that shoot out these little microwaves, and they bounce off the bird or rain or whatever happens to be in the airspace. And the amount of return signal that hits back to the radar dictates how many birds are in the airspace. And that can be sort of our metric of measuring how many birds are in these roosts. So we looked at the whole Nashville region by using data from this KOHX radar station. So we were able to get coverage of about 150-kilometer radius around Nashville, and we picked up dozens of roosts actually that appear every year, almost every year. And so we have all this data, like 10 years worth, that we looked at. And it's really quite a daunting task to sort of screen through that manually, every single frame of every morning of every season for the past 10 years. And historically, it's just been impossible to do this sort of analysis on a large scale like this. But recently, machine learning technology has allowed us to essentially almost skip that step entirely and basically have the roosts be automatically detected by this machine learning algorithm. And the algorithm looks just like this. So here's another exemplary morning of the Nashville area. And you can see these boxes basically surrounding each roost. And that's the machine learning algorithm picking up every roost, detecting it based on that distinct ring shape that shows up. So after running the model through this radar data, we can have coordinates of every frame of every roost. And it really facilitates our process of jumping to the step where we can start to quantify this data. And it also helps us figure out where roosts are forming. So say we take this morning and we take the first frame of each machine learning data set or data point, and we can use that as our sort of metric of our best guess of where exactly the roost formed. So we can take every roost occurrence that appeared in the past 10 years, get each of these points for every morning, throw them on a map, and it looks something like this. This is every point that the machine learning model detected in the Nashville region for the past 10 years, from 2013 to 2023 specifically. And so we have all this data, but next step is figuring out how to sort of filter out false positives, things like weather events that look like roosts and sort of radar anomalies that basically cause false detections. And so if you look closely at this map, you can see these distinct clusters of points that form here and there, especially around the Nashville area. And the sort of closer you are to the radar, which is about right here, the more dense these clusters are. And that's a product of the sort of range error that occurs. So the farther away a roost is from the radar, the further time the birds have to get up before the radar beam hits them and detects the roost. And so that causes roosts farther away from the radar to sort of get further out from the exact roost site before being detected. But nevertheless, we can sort of use this clustering analysis to detect true clusters of roosts. And after we do that, the product looks like this. So every cluster is color-coded on this map, and all the noise filtered out by this clustering algorithm are these black dots here. And then, I promise, but we're almost done with the methods here. I know we're in the weeds, but it'll be useful for understanding the results. The last step we really do here is get the mean sort of center of each of these clusters to give us our best guess or estimate of the true roost location. And once we do that, we have our final product of the exact best guess location of every roost that has occurred in the Nashville region over the past 10 years. So now we have our data set and we can start asking the fun questions. And for this analysis that we did, we asked three main questions, which is when the peak roost season is, which will be useful for us that want to go and see the roost at its biggest. And we also wanted to figure out how disturbance events have impacted these roosts. And then we wanted to figure out which roost sites are the most important, which ones are used most frequently and have been around the longest and are basically the biggest. So the first thing that we did was we jumped into that first question. So when the peak roost season is. And so if we zoom into our Nashville roost and we take every emergence over the past 10 years and put them on a plot. So we have the date of the emergence on the x-axis here for each year. And then on the y-axis, we have an estimate of how big that roost was on that day. And you can see for most years, we have these general humps, which fits perfectly. And this sort of faded bar on each year is that sort of 7-day window where statistically is most likely to find the roost at its largest size. And the sort of line here is basically a smoothed statistical effect that shows the general trend of the roost size over the year based on the points. And as you can see, some years are a bit wobbly. They're not all perfect smooth humps that like you'd expect the roost to start small, get big, and then shrink again. And that's mainly just because we only have so many data points with the Nashville roost alone. And there's only so much data to work with for the statistical model to basically have enough to be fed to give correct estimates. But if we throw in the points of all the roosts that we saw in the region, update our plots, and it looks something like this. And these humps are much more smoother and give us more accurate predictions of when that peak roost season is. And that season ends up being about late July, early August. Most often that first week of August is when the roosts in the area are at their biggest. So the next question we have is, how can we use radar data to sort of measure the roost's annual change in size? And to address this question, radar data isn't perfect. These aren't perfect counts of the roosts. They're far from it. You know, it's flying birds moving through the air, being picked up in these little snapshots of the beam hitting them. And so we need to figure out how to best quantify these roosts with the radar data. And if we want to figure out their sort of annual change in size, then we need a proper metric of measuring these roosts. So it's important to think about how we measure roosts in order to determine which ones are more utilized and like quote unquote important than others. So initially, we would think that the sort of maximum roost size of a roost in a given year would be the best way of measuring it. But there are some other options, and we want to figure out how to best measure that essentially. So we basically have a roost size for each day of a given roost or a full year. And there are some flaws in using that max size metric of dictating a roost's general size, because if you just use that one roost size, you're sort of prone to basically losing a bunch of data. So all those other days of the roost emerging are sort of thrown out. And you basically lose a lot of data and you're prone to this sort of radar biases. So if there's a lot of weather covering up one roost in a given year, you may miss that max roost size. So we came up with something called cumulative sums. So you can basically add up the sum of each emergence over the course of a year and compare that cumulative sum between years. So this allows both the roost frequency, like how many times it emerges, and that total size overall to influence that final value of that cumulative sum. So to put this into a visualization, this is these are cumulative sums of the Nashville roost over the past 10 years. So each line is 1 year of the roost growing in size cumulatively. So you have the roost on day 1 at this size, plus the size of day 2 added to that, plus the size of day 3, 4, 5, all the way up to the last day the roost appears. And this is a really useful metric because we can see how that end cumulative sum changes over the course of 10 years. So these darker lines represent the earlier years, 2013, 2014, 15, and then the more brighter colors are the more recent years, so 2022, 3. And just with this plot alone, we can see that the Nashville roost has definitely shrunk in size over the past 10 years. And just to emphasize, that cumulative sum number that we're looking at are these points right at the end here. So you can take this size of the roost on each year and sort of put it on a plot and have it be represented by the size of the bubble. So this is a sort of an animated map of all the roosts in the region for each year, represented by the size of each bubble. And you can see that this is like, it's like a living, breathing network of little sparse roosts popping up here and there, may only last a year or two. And then you can see these more persistent roosts, these bigger circles, staying there year after year. And these are the more traditional roosts that we're looking to protect. And here's a nice map sort of labeling every roost that was detected around in the Nashville area, going all the way up into Madisonville and all the way down into Decherd. So this map sort of represents the persistence of these roosts by the color. So the more red the roost is, the more years it's been around. And the more yellow roosts mean they've only been around 1 or 2 years. And just like the last plot, size of the circles represents that basically average annual cumulative count. So, all right, before I get to that next slide, we're going to zoom into Nashville now and start to look at the disturbance effects on these roosts. But what's been really nice about this study is that we've been able to pair this radar data, which is super cool, with ground truth data, like people observing these roosts year after year, to help us sort of confirm what we're seeing with weather radar. So there's another animated map of the true roost location in downtown Nashville compared to our sort of mean center of that radar observed roost emergence. So for each year popping up here, we have the triangle, which is that true roost site collected by all the birders in Nashville. And then that circle for each year is that average center that was detected by basically the average of all those points picked up by our weather radar algorithm. And you can see that every year it's basically within 1.8 kilometers every year. The radar was like alarmingly accurate with respect to this. So it's pretty much because Nashville is so close to that radar station that it picks up that roost really early and close to the ground. And it's just cool that we can see the roost moving on such a fine scale, which isn't common when you're looking at radar data. But so let's get into this plot year by year. And so this plot on the right here is our estimated sort of population impact, which is really just the cumulative count for each year. This dark purple down here is the Nashville roost. So that annual cumulative count of the Nashville roost for each year. And this light purple is all the annual cumulative counts of all other roosts added together. And we wanted to see if these disturbance events, these dashed lines here, would affect the Nashville roost, but not the regional roost. So we wanted to make sure that apparent responses in the Nashville roost to these disturbance events were really just happening to the Nashville roost and weren't a part of this larger trend of population declines or booms and things like that. So we start in 2013. The Nashville roost is right by I-24, and it's there for a few years. Basically, every year it's there, the roost grows a bit bigger until it reaches its peak right around 2016. And after the birds left this year, this entire area was cut for road construction after the birds departed. I believe it was near a gas station or something like that. But basically, the trees were cut down. And the following year, they moved to the Metro Center. And there was a steep decline there. And only a subtle decline in the total regional roost population. So it's largely suggestive that it's the disturbance event, those trees being cut, that caused this dramatic loss in the Nashville roost population. So they move over to the Metro Center this year. They're there for the season, they leave, and then the trees are significantly pruned after the birds depart. So that's another disturbance event that happens, or 2 years in a row. And after that second year, they decline even further and reach just about as low as they were in that following year. So that following year in 2018, right about here, they roost in the pedestrian bridge, and they're there for 1 more year and grow a bit bigger the next year. No disturbance events happen then. And then in 2019, after the birds departed, there was another disturbance event. Most of the trees were cut for more construction, and it apparently led to a bit of a decline in 2020 when they moved to the Symphony Center. So now they're in the Symphony Center. They're there for 1 more year. And then in 2022, they're back on the pedestrian bridge. And then there's another disturbance event. And then they go back to the Symphony Center. So I believe in 2022, they were cut and then moved there before they got there. And so I know at this point, it's pretty apparent that these disturbance events are causing these declines in the Nashville roost. And the next question that most people would ask is where these birds are going instead of the Nashville roost. Which roosts are they switching to? And it's a tricky question to answer like absolutely definitively without tracking data, but we can make some educated guesses on that. So this plot basically shows the size of each roost and whether it exists or not for each year. So we have the Nashville roost at the bottom, and these more persistent roosts at the bottom, and then the more ephemeral temporary roosts up top. And the size of the bubbles represent how big the roosts are. And you can see after 2016 in Nashville, that first major disturbance event, the Bowling Green roost kind of blew up in size. And the Bowling roost has, to this day, existed as the more predominant roost in the region. It's the largest, most persistent, and yeah, Madisonville has stayed pretty consistent over the years, bit of a decline in 2015. But we can essentially sort of gauge how roost switching has occurred with this plot. And it also helps us show which roosts are the most important based on the size of the circles and how many of the circles there are in each row. And it kind of leads us to indicate that this Detchard roost was really important. And then for whatever reason, it stopped existing in 2021. And this Bowling Green roost has kind of blown up to be the most significant roost in the region. And then the Madisonville roost and Nashville roosts have also been super persistent, been around for at least 10 years. So I know I just threw a lot at everyone, but just main takeaways to gather from this is peak roost seasons in the Nashville area are that first week of August. If you want to go to a roost watch party, anything like that, that's the ideal season to go. And the 4 major persistent roosts that have been identified in this area are in Detchard, Tennessee, Madisonville, Kentucky, Bowling Green, Tennessee, and Nashville. And I would highly suggest people going to check out that Bowling Green roost. I haven't seen or heard anything about it, but it's pretty far from the radar and it's still picking up huge numbers, which is really significant. It must be a huge roost. And yeah, based on our preliminary results, just on that purple figure that I showed you, it is pretty apparent that these disturbance events are causing the Nashville roost to decline. So yeah, and you know, I know I sped through this, but this was a lot of research that went into this, a lot of help. Maria Bellotti has been a huge help. She's like the Purple Martin radar person, did a ton of work in the Great Lakes. And my advisor, Jeff Kelly, has been really helpful in figuring out how to best study these roosts. Machine learning model provided by Dan Sheldon's lab at UMass. Thank you for all the conservationists that gathered that ground truth radar data. And yeah, thanks to eBird birders, we can sort of confirm that these are Purple Martin roosts. And sorry, last minute, how am I on time? Okay.
You did perfect. And I think
Okay.
we're gonna go ahead and Rachel's gathering the questions. People are putting their questions in the Q&A, and we'll go ahead and do those all at the end.
Great.
But that was so fascinating, and I can't wait to dig into your report. And I am so very grateful, Will, to you for taking on this project that wasn't on your radar when you first started your project. So this was an additional thing that you did, and I really appreciate it. I think this is going to be fabulous to dig through. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. I mean, all this really is possible because of that machine learning data set. Like, I think it's just a real game changer that's facilitated all of this research. And like beyond this project, I think there's just great potential in leveraging it to inform conservationists and birders of where these roosts are.
That's exactly, that's the end goal, is to
Yeah.
make some changes, right?
Big time, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, thank you. We'll get to some questions. I know I have a few too. But in the meantime, we're gonna jump to Jessa. So Jessa, Will, can you stop sharing, and then Jessa can go ahead and get hers up? I'm going to do a quick intro for Jessa. So Jessa Tremblay is the community engagement naturalist with Nashville Parks. She's been working with Metro Parks since 2021. Before joining Parks, she received her master's degree in sustainability at Lipscomb University and did a year of service with AmeriCorps, working for Plant the Seed, a hands-on garden-based program for urban schools. She's passionate about teaching people about the ways they can be more sustainable in their own lives and wildflowers and butterflies. So please help me in welcoming Jessa.
Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be teaching you all how you can get involved and volunteer with our Purple Martin efforts here in Nashville. We already did my bio, but my name is Jessa Tremblay, and I'm the Community Engagement Naturalist with Metro Parks Nashville. That means that I get to go out into the community and I get to do environmental education. I'm not stuck to a nature center, so I can lead volunteer efforts at places like the Roost. And I'm really excited to dive into this today. So the very first thing that you can do to help us with Purple Martin efforts here in Nashville is help us find the Roost. We don't really know exactly where this year's Roost location is going to be. It has moved throughout Nashville through many years, as we just saw in the previous presentation. It's especially if trees have been cut down or trimmed in previous locations, these birds are going to look for a new roost. It would be great if they went back to the same spot every single year, but we just don't know. And we need your help to find it this year. Okay, so we have a Survey 123 link. I have a QR code up on the screen, and a little video should be on the right, and that just shows you what this survey looks like. We need things like the date and time that you see the Purple Martins, what kind of behaviors the Purple Martins are displaying, how many that you see together, exactly where you're seeing the Purple Martins. And we also ask that you make sure that what you are looking at is an actual Purple Martin. There is the European starling that looks very similar to the martin. And also they do a lot of roosting type behaviors. So you want to make sure that the bird that you're looking at is actually a Purple Martin and not that starling. However, if you're unsure, still report it and try to get a picture or sound of the birds. And then we can look at that data, and we can also help you determine if what you saw was actually Purple Martins roosting or if they were starlings. It's a very simple little survey, and that is the very first thing that we need, because if we can't find the roost, then we can't do any other type of volunteering around it. So once we find the roost, we need people to help us be roost education volunteers. Our education volunteers are going to help us educate the public about the roost. They're going to monitor the roost, and they're going to help staff our Purple Martin watch parties. If you haven't been to one of our Purple Martin watch parties yet, you definitely need to come this year. They're so much fun. We send out invitations all around and encourage people to come to our parties where we have educators, where we have people that actually have some of the equipment to pick up some of the tags that are on the birds, so you can learn about that and see it in action. And we all get to be together to watch all the birds come to their roost that evening. And we need people that can talk to the public about what's going on. And that is what we will be needing. Okay, so why do we want to educate people? So as discussed in some of the previous presentations, during the late summer, adults and fledglings gather in these huge flocks before they head down to South America for the winter. And monitoring the birds at the Nashville Roost can help us keep track of the flock's movements and location preferences. As you can see, that can help with people doing science. If we have that exact roost location and we pair that with data that other people are combining, we can really help them out. And also, being present at the roost and educating the public about purple martins helps ensure that the roost location remains safe for the birds. We want to make sure that no one is trying to spray the birds with water or cut down their trees while they're in them. We want to make sure that we educate the public as to why they are there, so they don't try to hurt the birds or move the birds or do anything bad with the birds. We also want them to get excited about the birds. We want them to not see the birds as a hindrance. We want them to see the birds as a benefit, and they really can be a benefit, especially because we've had people travel to Nashville specifically to see these birds. And if we can really push that towards businesses and people that are in Nashville, let them know that these birds can be something that brings people here, can be something that brings us all together, I think that a lot of people will be a lot more receptive towards these birds. And if you don't feel like you are knowledgeable enough about purple martins, don't worry, we will train you. We will make sure that you feel comfortable and that you know your material before you go out there and talk to people about the birds. And if you are interested in volunteering with that, there's a QR code here in the presentation that you can scan. That'll bring you to a Hands-on Nashville link, and you can sign up there to be interested in becoming a volunteer. So what a typical night looks like when you're doing this education is you try to get to the roost at least 15 minutes before sunset. Sunset is a little bit after 8 p.m. around this time of year. And ideally, you will stay to monitor that roost that entire time, from when they're up in the sky till when they're fully settled in the trees. And that often is about 45 minutes after sunset. It will be very dark by that point. Once you are done with that observation and you're home, we really recommend filling out our observation sheet that will have things like what you estimate the roost size to be, how many people you talk to, and and some other observances that you make about the roost. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, please get involved. You can do it multiple ways. You can sign up through that Hands-on Nashville link, or you can also email me at jessa.tremblay@nashville.gov. And thank you so much. And I think we are heading on to questions next.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessa. Really appreciate it. Rachel, so folks, if you have questions, if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and start to put those in the Q&A. And Rachel's going to help moderate this, this portion of our presentation.
Yeah, thank you guys for your questions that have come through so far. So I'm going to start with one for Joe. There was a question about early on, so where they're going in the Amazon, it seems like it's a very specific location where they're going. And the question was, what's the status of deforestation in the areas where we know purple martins are going? And are they in one of those areas being actively impacted?
Yeah, that's a good question. So where they go is both focused but also broad. So they're out all over the place. They come back to these little roosts. A lot of times these little roosts are in little islands. You know, deforestation is a big problem down there, as it is, I mean, around the globe. But The purple martins are a little maybe more adaptable to deforestation than some of your typical forest birds, because these guys are flying above the forest. And really, agricultural areas, which is what these deforested areas turn into, the purple martins will kind of feed over those too. What is more of a concern of ours that we're trying to focus our research on is what ecotox contaminants they may be encountering down there. Our initial foray into looking at what pollution they may be encountering is looking at mercury, which we're finding significant levels of mercury in purple martin blood and feathers from down there. So the source of mercury is both natural and also from illegal gold mining in the Amazon. That's our first foray into looking at the pollution that may be affecting them, but we have plans to look at some of the other pesticides that are out there and some of these forever chemicals that are we're learning more and more about. But the deforestation specifically is maybe not that strong of an effect on purple martins. Certainly it affects the insect populations as a whole down there, and changes some of this habitat where they might be roosting. But the Amazon is still a real big place, and there's still a lot of places that aren't deforested, thankfully yet. Hopefully we don't get to the point where these guys are really struggling to find some trees to go land in.
Thanks, Joe. That really helps. I really appreciate that. Another question that we have for Will and Maria. I love this question. How large does the roost have to be for it to be detected by radar?
Okay, I can take that one. So actually, this is a hard question to answer just because, as Will mentioned, there is some range. So like the distance from the radar might influence the types or the sizes of roosts that we can measure. So I'll say one of the main problems with working with radar data is the range. So whenever you see people talking about radar, you have to ask them, are they taking range into account? But I would, right now, I would say maybe we can detect something as small as 1,000 birds if it's very close to the radar. If it's a little more far away, then that becomes kind of a more complicated question that it's harder to figure out.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, the distance does make a difference. And so that kind of leads into another question. I know we're talking about the Nashville, Tennessee, and Kentucky area, but I'm wondering about, are there other radars out there that have been tracking data in other cities? Because, you see the whole range map, it's Eastern United States. So there are other places that are tracking data like this and analyzing it like you guys have been.
Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, this is actually I've just looked at tree swallow roosts with weather radar data. And right now I'm looking at just 17 radars over the whole eastern seaboard. And it's mainly tree swallow roosts on the East Coast. The Great Lakes region that Maria has worked with is more predominantly purple martin stuff. But yeah, I mean, this is what gets me so excited about it. It's just this huge network of bird congregations showing up on weather radar every morning. And you can visualize it sort of like a social network where they switch roosts here and there. And like the fact that you can quantify this and that these stations have been collecting this data for like 30 years is really fascinating and exciting. So I don't know of specific cities where the roosts have occurred, but yeah, they really, when you see it on a map of the whole eastern seaboard, they just are glued to big rivers and kind of the ocean. Yeah,
I could perhaps chime in with a little information on this. Yeah, so purple martin roosts in cities is typically something that's seen more in the south central parts of the United States. So Texas is a big place where purple martin roosts are in cities. There's a big one in Austin. There's a big one in Houston. There's one in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And those are really persistent in their locations. So what makes the Nashville roost such an interesting case, unfortunately, is that it gets chased around a lot. People will cut the trees down, and then we'll be on the hunt for where did it go to now. That's not to say that all the Texas roosts are completely unbothered, but Texas is a big place for a purple martin roost in cities. Is typically like in a mall parking lot, that sort of thing. There's some in Louisiana that are in cities. But as you get farther north and farther east in their range, they tend to be a little more aquatic habitat, ponds and lakes and rivers and that sort of thing. So it's more of a southern thing for them to be in these urban situations.
Thanks, Joe. It looks like we've got two more quick questions. One is near and dear to my heart. So it's sort of a two-part question, and this might be open for anyone. They have a fairly new purple martin birdhouse, and they want to know how to attract birds to their house. And also, the second question was really, is putting up a purple martin birdhouse helpful in actually maintaining the population at this point? I know we're talking about roosts, but in terms of just putting up houses in our own backyards.
Well, if nobody else wants to jump in, these are the questions I answer every day. So to attract purple martins, you have to have your purple martin house in the right spot. So in a clear flyway. It doesn't hurt to have water nearby, but it's not absolutely required. Purple martins will get a lot of the water they need from the food that they eat, but they'll also travel longer distances to go and get water if they need it directly. And then as far as how to attract them, if you've got everything else in the right spot, have your housing open at the right time of the year when the martins arrive in the spring. Make sure that the sparrows and starlings haven't moved in there. And for that matter, tree swallows as well. Sorry, Will. They're kind of bullies when it comes to purple martins as well. But you can put a bluebird house over to the side. Tree swallows will live in there happily. So make sure nobody else has moved in there, because as I kind of explained, the sparrows and starlings push them around a little bit. The purple martins have a little bit more of a self-confidence problem maybe. But make sure nobody else is living there. Play audio playback of purple martin calls. That's a huge attractor to them. They're a colonial species. They don't want to be the only one nesting there. So it's all about making them feel like other birds are around, even if they're not. So playing audio playback of purple martin calls, putting out plastic purple martin decoys, those are the types of things that you can do to attract purple martins. And then a little bit of patience and a little bit of luck sometimes is helpful as well. And then
I was going to add that last part. We had at Warner Parks, we had our gourds up for 8 or 9 years, I think, before they started using them, and now they use them every year.
Yeah. Once you get them, they've got strong site fidelity, so they will come back to your backyard year after year, and it's really kind of a strong bond that, it gets emotional. Like these birds made this huge, long migration down to the wilds of the Amazon, and then they came all the way back expecting you to have that birdhouse back up in the backyard, and thankfully you did that. So that kind of leads to the other question of, is it helpful to have purple martin housing for the species? Absolutely. Without people putting up purple martin houses, this species goes extinct. So every single purple martin house up there is a direct impact on the population of the species. I can think of maybe no other example that has such a connection between human activity and the direct benefit on the species population as a whole. Birdhouses equal purple martins, because there's not a single purple martin colony of naturally nesting purple martins anymore, unfortunately.
This is great information, Joe. Thank you so much. We're getting more questions in, so I'm going to go try to answer them in the time that we have. Just a quick question. Which city do you think is the most Purple Martin friendly? Who wants to answer that one?
No comment. I'm not touching that.
I'm going to say Austin, Texas. That's where I lived for a while.
That's a good one. Honestly, I can think of no other city in the U.S. that has embraced a Purple Martin roost in the way that Austin has. So I think that's a great selection there. They have done wonders for the roost there, and working with property owners to alleviate those conflicts that Nashville has been seeing in the past here. And it's just in a good spot. They have huge parties like you guys are doing, and the birds are better off for it.
We're going to get Nashville there. I feel it.
I hope so.
Another question is, are the birds, as they migrate south, do they actually move from roost to roost as they head south, or do they pretty much just on their own as a whole roost make their way down south?
I'll jump in here too, I guess, unless one of our radar people want to chime in. So it used to be thought that the Purple Martins, maybe from the northern part of the range, like Canada or whatever, they will bounce through roosts through, all the way down to the southern U.S. We're really not seeing that in our GPS data. They have their local roosts close by where they nested, and then they just kind of cruise. We're working on trying to get partners in Mexico, in the Yucatan area, to go visit some of these places that we're thinking that they're at in large numbers, but we don't know if that is like a traditional roost like you would expect. And then once they get down into, it's very disconnected and disorganized migration down. Everybody's moving the same way, but they're not moving in groups. They're not necessarily staying at the same place overnight. And then when they get down into Brazil, there's some roosting that goes on, but then you've got some birds that are really kind of, lone wolfing it a little bit. And then, it gets a little more organized before they come back north. I think they kind of fall in more into that pre-migratory roost behavior, where, other times down in Brazil, it's, they're roosting, but it's not like big time roost.
Excellent. And literally last question, can you have bat boxes and Purple Martin housing in the same area? I say yes.
Bat boxes and Purple Martins?
Bat boxes and Purple Martins.
Yeah, that's a day and the night shift for insect control.
Good. There you go.
Absolutely. Good. Heck yeah. Yeah, if you,
Perfect.
Unfortunately, the thing I don't like to correct people on is Purple Martins don't eat a lot of mosquitoes. They're just not out at the right time of day, and they eat farther up in the air. So if you really want to get mosquitoes control, put out some bat boxes.
Thanks, Joe.
Can I just add to Joe's question about the roost hopping idea? So I want to use this as an opportunity to mention what Jessa commented about roost watch parties. I think one of the cool things that we can get at with these watch parties is people looking for banded birds. So banded birds, they will have kind of like a ring around their tarsus or their legs. And if we are able to capture enough, like if we're not going to capture them, just capture them in photos, we can get so much information about where they've been. If like maybe we see hopping roosts or hopping birds that have been hopping because we are able to capture a banded bird that was banded further north, for example. So if this is something that you're into, it would be super helpful to have more eyes on the ground, so that we can answer some of these super interesting and kind of like very hard to answer questions about the behavior of these roosts and the birds.
That's an excellent point, Maria. Thank you so much. I love that. All right.
Any more questions, Rachel?
I don't see any more questions. I'm looking.
Okay.
I think we're good.
All right. Well, Thank you. I've been looking forward to this for months. So a huge thank you to Joe and Will and Maria and Jessa for doing this. Thank you also to Rachel for being our IT wizard, and Cassie for sending out all of the links to this webinar. Really appreciate everyone, and look forward to more collaboration with you guys. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to be here.
Thank you guys
Thanks.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Will.
you.
Thank you.